Hi, my name is Katie Hartnett, and today I'm going to be talking about macular degeneration, which falls under the visually impaired category, and we're going to be talking about this disease, how it relates to students, what that means for students, and how we as teachers can accommodate to those students. So first I'm going to discuss what being visually impaired means. So the IDEA states that it's an impairment in vision that even with correction can negatively affect a child's educational experiences and performances. This can include either full blindness or just partial sight loss. Now, when we're talking about macular degeneration specifically, it is incurable. There are many genetic and environmental factors that contribute to this disease. It can be passed down from family members, or environmental factors like smoking and a poor diet can also contribute to this development. So we'd hope our children are getting this genetically. Obviously, we were hoping that they're not smoking or and that they have a healthy diet. So majority of the time, the children that have this disease, it's genetic or passed down. So this causes the deterioration of macula, the central portion of retina, and it can include a loss of central vision. So that can mean like blurry, distorted vision. It can often look like kind of a black circle in the middle of their vision. So a lot of these students rely on their peripheral sight to see what's going on. This can also cause a loss of being able to identify colors effectively. There are two kinds of macular degeneration. The first is wet. It's atrophic and it involves leaky blood vessels or burst blood vessels. This involves about 10 to 15% of cases, so it's a lot less likely than the second kind, which is dry. This is where resin deposits or fats combined with proteins are formed, and it makes up 85 to 90% of cases. So this is a lot more common than the wet kind, but it can turn into wet. So the dry kind of macular degeneration can eventually turn into wet, so it's important to look for those kind of leaky blood vessels or burst blood vessels. When we're talking about children specifically, there are diseases that are most common in children. The first is Stargardt disease. This is a part of macular degeneration, obviously, and it causes vision loss in children and young adults. This is passed down from family members, and it's where light-sensing cells in the macula or photoreceptors actually die. And this can cause what I talked about earlier, which is trouble seeing colors. So it can be really hard for students to identify colors, and I actually talk about this later in my accommodations. So the next disease is Best's disease, and this is where there's a gene mutation in bestrophin. The macula actually kind of resembles an egg. It looks like it might burst. This can include blurry, distorted, and missing central vision, which we were talking about, which is kind of that like black circle in the middle of their vision. And when we're talking about treatments for this disease, there is no cure, but there are some things that can aid students or children with this disease. So there are low vision aids. This involves special magnifying glasses that can be either physical or like screen magnification devices on a computer. Second is just sunglasses for UV ray protection. And the third, there are actually some clinical trials to try and cure this disease, but for Stargardt, it can cause night blindness. So there are some downsides to those clinical trials. So students with the disease in particular may have trouble seeing the board. It might look like they're not paying attention sometimes because a lot of the time they're turning their head to use their peripheral vision to see what's going on. So when you think a student might not be paying attention with this disease, but they're turning like this, they might actually be trying to use their side vision to see the board or see what's going on, and that can be very difficult for them. Another thing is that students can struggle with eye fatigue, so they can be straining their eyes a lot and have some trouble being able to see what's going on just because they're putting in so much effort to be able to see. This can also lead to some emotional difficulties, so students might be frustrated that they're having so much eye fatigue or eye strain and that they can't see as well as their classmates. This also, something to look out for is trouble with bright lights and glares. So in the classroom, you should really focus on even lighting and also identifying colors, which we talked about earlier. So how do we accommodate to this? Well, I have a couple here for you. So you can use large print, color identification, seating students in front of the class, utilizing audiobooks, providing magnifying devices, providing copies of notes and lessons, and extending assignment times. So the first one I want to talk about is large print. So providing students notes, assignments, and tests with larger print will make it easier for them to read what's going on. I actually talk about this in one of my accommodation videos too. I really liked the idea of putting the text on the left or right side of the paper if possible, just so they're not having to rely on that central vision as much. I think it's great and a great idea to look up different fonts for low vision students. I actually have a link underneath my accommodation video with different fonts you can use. Another accommodation is seating students in front of the class. Obviously, if they're having to strain their eyes to look at things, you're going to want to put them as close to the action as possible to minimize this discomfort. The next is providing copies of notes and lessons. They may have trouble seeing the board and therefore following along with what's going on. So providing students with either a recording of you teaching the lesson or just text or copies of the text or of notes in large print can be extremely beneficial. Another is audiobooks, which is also an accommodation video I'm going to show. Students might not be able to read effectively with low vision, so providing them with audiobooks that they can listen to and use their auditory processes rather than their sight is a great way to accommodate. Now, we've talked about color identification a lot, so how do you help this in the classroom? So in the classroom, you can go ahead and identify different objects with their colors. So that would mean putting a label in large print, obviously, so the students can read it, what color things are. We also talked about providing magnifying devices, and I talked about how that can include a physical magnifying glass for students or something on their computer screen to help them see. Also, extending assignment times is important. They're obviously having a lot of eye fatigue, so it's going to take them longer most likely to complete assignments just because they have to put in more effort to see what's going on. Also, maybe due to some emotional difficulties, they might be frustrated, so extending those assignment times is a great way to accommodate. I went ahead and included two more that I liked. So for central vision loss, you can have students practice scanning, tracing, and following objects. And you can also provide students with an outlet to talk to you. I really like this one because we did talk about emotional difficulties that students may have earlier. And I think providing them with either like a little box, a letter box, to write out how they're feeling to you would be such a great way to help those students. Now, when we're talking about two accommodations in particular, I chose large print and exploring audiobooks to delve deeper into. So I'm going to go ahead and show you these videos. All right. So that was my first accommodation for large print. Obviously, I talked about moving the text to the left or the right side of the paper, making it bigger for students, and also using some of those fonts, which I have linked here, that are great for low vision students. So my next video is about exploring audiobooks. Oh, I cut out that last bit. Oh, it looks like it cut out that last bit of the video, but during silent reading time, students are able to utilize audiobooks, so their auditory processes, to listen to what's going on if they're unable to read during that time. So next I have a link to my study guide and handout about macular degeneration. So in this handout, I just have what it is. I have the 2 diseases that are most commonly seen in students that we talked about, the struggles that we talked about that students may have, and different accommodations for students. I also have 2 links to more resources. It's actually linked over here as well. So I'll go ahead and click on them for you. So this first one is just about juvenile macular degeneration. So this is just delving deeper into those diseases that we talked about, specifically Stargardt and Best's. And then this second link right here just includes some more accommodations for students with low vision. It's actually a very in-depth article about it. So this is great for teachers to use if they're looking for more ways to help those students. Lastly, I just have my reference pages in APA format. So that's a little bit about macular degeneration, what it is, how students may struggle with the disease in the classroom, and how we can